Everybody, thank you for joining the ACA Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective for this Tuesday morning. I'm Robert Theobald, Small Business Ombudsman and Vice President of Small Business Services here at the Arizona Commerce Authority. We are very excited to have this session today. First, I want to thank our community partners. We could not do the boot camps without their support and their feedback, and again, their great knowledge that they're sharing with us. The Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective is designed to help small businesses return stronger from the COVID crisis. It's a statewide initiative supported by our community partners throughout the state. We've had community partners from all over the state participate, and we appreciate their support in that. And it is a daily boot camp that we are running through July. We started back in May and going through July. And with that, on our website, you can find all those previous recordings. It's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. But if you can't make that, then you can go back and review the sessions, and you can find them on the azcommerce.com Small Business Bootcamp website. You have the link here on this screen. Additionally, part of it is a resource collective. This is the information and resources brought by our community partners to help small businesses through this crisis, not just the presentations, but there's other guides and resources that they have shared with us. And we post all that information as we get that and update it as often as we can with new information every week. So this week, we had a great session yesterday on employee engagement. Today we have how to make every pitch count and talking about branding. Tomorrow we have overcoming obstacles in your business. Thursday is a paycheck, there's a PPP program, loan forgiveness session. And Friday is how to produce your own marketing videos. So we got some great sessions again this week with great content to help support you. So some quick updates again, as you've all heard if you were on yesterday, or last week, the PPP extension has been signed. So the PPP program will continue, the loan program, through August 8th. Arizona, through the end of June, had received over 81,000 loans for over $8.6 billion, averaging 106,000 as the average loan for the PPP program. For the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, Arizona companies, 39,270 Arizona companies have received loans for over $2.3 billion, averaging 58,000 per loan. And then a note that as of July 11th, the EIDL Advance concluded. That program ended when the SBA had awarded the $20 billion that was set aside for the Advance. And so they've reached that mark rate, had to conclude the Advance program. However, the loan program is still available. And just a reminder, the terms are 30 years at a 3.75 interest rate, which is a pretty good deal on a loan. So that is still available to apply for. So other programs and resources the ACA has available for small businesses and small business services. We can help support with local banking contact, working with the SBA, connecting with the SBDC and SCORE and other resources for small businesses. Our workforce division can help employers find new employees, as well as they manage some training programs for employers to help their employees, new employees, gain that training that they need to be successful. And then our Arizona MEP is our Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and they are a great resource for all the manufacturers out in Arizona. A quick shout out for the state's Arizona Together COVID-19 Information Resource website. If you need information for the COVID pandemic, you can find it there. This is a quick list I like to share every day for the different guides and resources that are available for small businesses, whether you're a salon, contractor, retail, restaurant. There's great information out there for you, and then we have links for this on our Resource Collective. Additionally, we've just updated our website, our Arizona Business Resources website, azcommerce.com/COVID-19. We update that constantly, daily with new materials. We've also just recently updated the look and feel to make it easier to navigate. So today's speaker, we're excited to have Mike Jones. He's the CEO of Resound. One of the little tidbits in his bio, want to reference is he was named the Phoenix Business Journal's 40 Under 40. He's also co-led the Phoenix Startup Week. So we are excited to have him here today. He's got a great presentation plan. So Mike, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn the time over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. And thank you to the Arizona Commerce Authority for having me. I'm going to share my screen now and we'll get started with our presentation. Let me get this going here. Hopefully everybody can see that all right. If you can't, just hop in the chat. And I'll be trying to monitor the chat as well as we're going here. So if you've got any like burning question, I'll try to see if I can get to it while I'm going. Otherwise, there'll be some Q&A here at the end. But yeah, we're going to jump right in. We've got a lot of content to get through today. So I want to make sure we've got as much time as we can to get through everything. So presentation today is make every pitch count. And what I mean by that is actually getting to craft your compelling brand pitch, so how you pitch your brand, to gain clarity, consistency, and customers with your business. And we'll get into all of that and what that means here. But first, a little bit about me. So as Robert already mentioned, I'm CEO of Resound. I do a lot of other things. I've co-led Phoenix Startup Week for a few years now, part of a lot of different organizations here around town. But my main thing that I do is I talk and believe and help companies understand how to build their brands. I'm a strategist at heart, and that's what I do. And I do that through my agency, Resound. A little bit about us, just really quick. So we actually believe that because people are intrinsically remarkable and organizations are created by human beings, that every organization is remarkable too. That means every business. But there's a problem in that, unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't actually act like they are remarkable. And that's where we come in. Resound is an agency that helps specifically B2B companies find their authentic identities in order to resonate with their audiences and build lasting customer relationships through content, design, and video. Some of the services we offer, I already mentioned design, content, and video. There's a little bit more breakdown here. I'm not going to go into all that. And then these are some of the companies that we've helped over the years. We've worked with hundreds of different companies, a lot here in Arizona, but across the country as well. These are just a few that are more local here. Let me make sure my slides are advancing. There we go. All right, so we've got a little bit of an agenda today. So what I've done is I do these brand workshops with clients of mine, and we'll spend upwards of even 2 or 3 days together all day working on their brand. And one of the pieces of that workshop is this brand pitch. And so what I'm doing today is taking that, condensing it down into hopefully just about 45 minutes, if we're flying pretty fast here. And we're going to work through each of these portions of our modules. So we're going to do a little intro exercise, get you guys warmed up and thinking about brand. And then I want to actually understand brand, make sure we're all on the same page about what it is and why it matters. And then we're going to talk about your brand pitch. What is that? How does that work? And how does that kind of fit into your larger brand and what you're trying to do to put your business on the map? How do you build your brand pitch? I'm going to give you a basic framework for your brand pitch and how to build it. And then I'm going to give you some ideas of how you can take it to the next step, the next level. And then finally, I'm going to give you some steps that you can take at the end to actually build your own brand pitch and make sure that it's actually something really interesting and compelling and ways in which you can use it in both your marketing, communications, even in your own internal development of staff. So real quick, we're going to do an exercise here. So what I want you to do is either in your head or on a piece of paper, if you've got something really handy in front of you, take 15 seconds and I want you to draw a funky picture. Okay. So take 15 seconds, go really fast, draw a funky picture. Do it in your head if you want. Okay. You got something starting to come together. You only got 5 more seconds. Going fast today. All right. So the question is, you drew something. Maybe you didn't quite get it done, but that's fine. Who defined funky in this exercise? Think about that, right? So you did. You actually defined what funky was. But the real question is, does your customer agree with you? And in this exercise, who was your customer? Who asked you to deliver something? Well, I did, right? So then the question is, if I don't agree with your definition of funky, right? You drew some funky picture that you thought was funky, and I looked at it and said, nah, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if that's funky enough. Did you fail, right? So then this leads us to this larger question. Who gets to define your brand, right? And in the same way that you got to define the funky picture, I think that brands get to define themselves, right? It's your brand. You're creating it. It's your organization. It's your identity that you're putting out into the world. Why would someone else get to define that for you, right? It's your brand, so you get to define it. And there's a symbiotic relationship between your brand and your customers. And if your customers agree with your brand definition, the way that you put yourself out in the world, they're going to tell you. And they're primarily going to tell you because they either buy from you or they don't, right? If they disagree with your brand definition, they're like, that's not really you. That doesn't feel like you. They're probably just not going to have a relationship with you, right? And I think there's really two fundamental issues when you are putting your brand out in the world and you're finding that you're not resonating with customers, that there's two fundamental reasons for that. One is you're not communicating and behaving according to your brand, right? So you kind of sat down or you thought about, what is it? Who are we? What do we want to put out into the world? But when push comes to shove and you start behaving, you start putting communication out, you start marketing, you start doing customer service, sales, operations, you actually start producing a product or a service, it just doesn't resonate with the definition that you put together to begin with, right? Or your customers are the wrong fit for your brand, right? And this oftentimes happens with legacy brands. So organizations that have been around a while, a lot of times the customers you started with are not the same kinds of customers that you want to get today, right? That really fit who you are because your organization has shifted. It's changed, but your customers probably haven't, right? So if they've been with you a long time, they may not resonate with your brand anymore, right? Maybe consciously you've changed it, or maybe unconsciously you've changed your brand a bit. I want to tell you a little bit of a story to help kind of illustrate this and why brand is so important. So we all know this logo, right? Probably one of the most famous logos and famous brands in the entire world. And this is Nike, of course. Do you know that Nike did not start as this behemoth company? Really? Did you know that? Did you know they started like a small business like everybody else on the planet? Yeah. What were they known for originally in the 1970s? What was Phil Knight and his team like? What was the one product that they were known for? It was shoes, right? And in particular, it was running shoes for professional athletes. That was the only kind of product that they put out into the market. And at that time in the 1970s, that really was fine with them. Phil Knight, for the most part, was okay with that, although I think he had visions of a much larger brand. But his teams for sure loved that they were super niche and that they focused really on professional athletes and these really top quality, high quality shoes, specifically for runners, for professional runners. But as Phil kind of went through the process of kind of thinking and visioning, what do I want Nike to be? He realized, I want to be something more, right? And what's really interesting is that at his heart, he felt like there was a particular pitch or story to their brand that was much larger than just really high quality shoes for professional runners. What he understood and what he thought was that we're a brand about people accomplishing things. We're a brand about people getting better at what they do, right? In particular around athletic activities. And why can't we be a brand that does that, not just for professional athletes, but for the everyday person, right? And so he embarked on a journey in the late 70s and early 80s to transform the brand and really to put a pitch or a story out into the world that was a more complex and fuller picture of what Nike was really all about. And that culminated with something very interesting that we will all recognize, and that's the Just Do It campaign. This was really Nike's entry into consumer products. Up to this point, they really had been primarily known as a professional athlete brand. And when they launched Just Do It, it was really a campaign to just get their shoes in front of people beyond professional athletes. But what's interesting is it so resonated with people, not just because it fit who they were as consumers of these shoes, but also because it fit who Nike was, right? That this campaign, this tagline that they developed, that really, I mean, they probably were thinking maybe this tagline will last 18 months, maybe 3 years. I mean, that's a really good lifetime for an advertising campaign, right? If you can get 3 years out of a tagline for an advertising campaign, man, that's a great run. This became their official tagline for the company in all of their advertising for over 10 years. And you still see it show up in advertising for Nike. It's one of the most recognizable campaigns the world has ever seen from an advertising perspective. And I don't think that's by accident. Again, I think that's because it really resonates, not just with the consumer, right? This idea of just do it, victory, accomplishment, getting something done and doing that with Nike's products. But it actually resonates with who Nike is at their core, right? And so that's what I want to really challenge us to be thinking about today. I want to challenge you to think about your brand and your brand pitch, what it is and is not. And I want to help you define or start to define your authentic brand pitch. What's really true to your brand? Not just what you think others want you to hear or want you to say, but really what fits who you are as a brand. And then I'm going to give you some tools and tips and strategies to actually start building your brand pitch and make it remarkable, something that really is compelling for people, that gets the point across quickly. So a little bit of setup. We got to talk about brand, what it is and what it is not, because a lot of people come with presuppositions about that, make some assumptions. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page, and we're going to be working from my definition of brand. So this is going to help you kind of get inside my head for a couple minutes here. And if you don't agree with me on some of these points, that's fine. Take what you can from this. If you do agree with me, I hope that this really resonates with you. So I want to talk about what is a brand. So a lot of people are like, oh, it's just the name, right? It's the name. It's all about the name. And we can see here from these 4 brands, man, the name is really important, right? Here you've got 4 brands that if you say their name, likely you don't even realize that you are using a trademarked branded name, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've used the word popsicle for everything that is not a popsicle branded popsicle, right? It's an ice pop. I don't know. I don't even know what the generic term is for popsicle, right? They have done such a fantastic job naming their company, naming their brand around that particular brand, that brand name. But when I say, oh, that's the brand, right? The name. You go, nah, it's something more, Mike. It's got to be something more, right? Okay, let's put some visuals in there. So it's probably the logo too, right? And we can see that logos are pretty important and pretty recognizable, right? Here's 6 logos that I can put them on the screen with none of their names, and you know exactly who they are, right? They've done such a great job with their logos. And yet when I say, is that their brand? Just the logo? Or maybe just the logo and the name? You'd be like, no, Mike, there's something more. It's not just the logo and the name, right? And I would say, yes, I agree. There's something more. So, all right, let's add a little bit more communication. So maybe you throw in a tagline. And these are definitely some recognizable taglines. I bet you can actually name some of these brands just from their taglines. Some of these taglines they don't even use anymore, right? And yet you still know them. But the brand feels like something more than this, right? It's more than the name, the logo, and the tagline. Okay, so let's add some advertising in, right? And we could go back a few years. I'm not going to play the video, but you recognize this particular ad from the Super Bowl. It was the Tide ad, where they literally said Tide, I think like 20 different times in their ad. Great ad. It was very funny. It was entertaining. It got the brand in front of people, right? A lot of people were like, man, this is probably one of the best ads that year in 2018 in the Super Bowl. And yet when I say Tide, I say the brand Tide, does this ad and all of their advertising, is that the brand? You'd be like, no, Mike, there's definitely more. I mean, they got to have a product, right? Yeah, like your brand has to have something to offer people, right? You got to deliver some value. What does that look like? And I think this is where we're starting to get a little bit more into what brand really is, right? Now we're talking about design and the functionality of things and even the experience that you're creating. I mean, think about the iWatch or even Facebook and their interface that they've put together for people. And we can talk all about all the other issues they've got, but just from a product standpoint, or even the experience that Starbucks puts together, right? and we say the Starbucks brand. And now I think we're getting a little bit closer to what brand really means when we start talking about the entire product and service experience that a brand puts together. I mean, think about Starbucks for a second, right? How many different Starbucks have you been to that are in different cities, different locations, maybe even different parts of the world? And yet, if you walked in there and they didn't have their logo on the wall, but everything else was there, would you still know that it was Starbucks? Yeah, like they have done such a fantastic job building their brand experience and building that consistency that you can walk into pretty much any Starbucks and know exactly where you are, right? And they can even have the layout totally reversed in there, and things are not where you normally see them in your local Starbucks. And yet it still feels like Starbucks, right? And yet it does feel like it's more than all that stuff. There's something a little bit more. It's something a little bit deeper. And I would argue that that really means that your brand is your identity as an organization or as a group of people putting together products and services for others, right? That you start to form an identity behind what you're doing. And I want to talk a little bit about what that identity looks like. But first, I want to talk about the word brand. I think this will help us to understand how this word means something more than just, logos and names and advertising and even products and services. It means your identity. So when we think about the word brand, it actually comes from the Norse word brander, which literally originally meant to burn, right? To rub two sticks together and create a fire. Pretty quickly, that in an agrarian culture, that turned into this idea that we're probably a little more familiar with, which is branding your livestock, right? And really, this was a sense of allowing you to identify your livestock and keep it separate from someone else's livestock, right? You imagine like having all these sheep and your neighbor having all of their sheep on two different hills. And if they get mixed up in the middle, like, man, if you don't have some kind of marking on them, you're going to probably have a little fight going on, right? That one's mine and that one's yours and right? And so branding became a mark of signaling, right? This is mine. This is not yours, right? Let's keep these things separate, or at least like, let's have some kind of communication about what's going on here and whose is whose. So we don't have to have a little mini war every time that our sheep get mixed up together. As we move forward in history, I'm a history guy, so I love this, thinking about where words come from and how concepts originated and how they've transformed over time. We think about the mercantile world, right? The 1700s, the 1600s, even into the 1800s, right? People are starting to ship products all over the world. And pretty quickly, there becomes a need when the product rolls into the port, right? Comes off the ship, it's in an unmarked barrel or an unmarked crate, and then it goes into a shop. And this whole process, there's a lot of friction because at every point where that product has to change from one person to another, there's a big question mark of like, well, what's in there? What's in that barrel? And who's it supposed to go to? Where did it come from? And am I getting the right thing, right? And so pretty quickly, organizations like East India Tea Company and other big shipping companies or producers start to actually burnish or brand into the side of their crate or their barrel their name, right? Just to signify like, hey, this is our product, right? And this is the product that's inside. It's tea. Pretty soon, customers start to see that in the shop, and they start actually asking for products based not just on what kind of product they want. Like, oh, I want some tea, but I want tea from that particular company that had that marking on that barrel because the last time I got it, it was really good and I liked it and I want more of that. And now we start to see this modern concept of branding start to be established where companies and organizations start to actually put their mark as a seal of quality onto their products or onto the containers that their products are in. We fast forward again, right? Go another 100, 150 years into the future, we get to our modern day. And here we see a product that you can't even see the logo on it, right? We can think about, I mean, I've got some in my ears too, right? Here we've got one of the most iconic wearable products the world has ever seen, which is Apple's AirPods, right? The fact that you can wear these, it signals something to someone else, right? And now we have this concept that not only is a brand a signifier of quality, a certain level of quality, a certain level of service, but a brand is now a signaling of my social, what I want to put out into the world, right? My own identity is told through the brands that I wear or that I showcase, right? And we can even see this even in B2B type situations, right? I think a lot of people are like, well, that works for consumer products, but that doesn't work when I'm selling to another business, right? And I go, well, think about this. If you were to round up salespeople from, 20 different organizations and you put them in a room and you said, I want you to talk about your CRM, right? Your customer relationship management tool. And everyone's going to have, I use Salesforce and I use that and I use this. But the minute someone says something like Salesforce, you'll actually see a shift in how people, the other salespeople in that room, relate to that person. Because Salesforce has built a brand that people recognize and have a certain feeling or affinity towards. Like, oh, Salesforce, well, that's a big deal. We're still using blah, 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 right? And so there's even a sense of social kind of identification, right? That when we buy products and services, we're saying something not just about our desire to accomplish something, but we're saying something about what we value, right? And other people pick up on that. And that's, I think, the level of brand that we're getting to now. And just like your brand is going to grow over time. It doesn't stay static. You start somewhere and you end somewhere else. Hopefully there's a continuity through it, right? So in the case that we see right here, we have a seedling, a seed turns into a sapling, turns into a full tree that produces fruit at the end. And if we see this and we go, that's an orange tree, it's an orange tree throughout the entire process, right? The apple tree doesn't turn into, the apple seed doesn't turn into an orange tree. And I think that's what's really key to great brands is they understand that there's a continuity to their brand even as they change. If we think back to the story of Nike, Phil Knight understood that their brand was all about accomplishing things and victory in your life, right? And no matter what product or service that they developed or that they grew and how many more people that they were able to produce value for, that they would always maintain that particular thread through everything that they did. And we've seen them do that very, very well. And it's allowed them to grow in a way that makes sense to people, right? It has to start from the bottom up, right? And I think that's why, again, going back to the Nike story, when we start from the bottom, we start from the most fundamental things to our brand, we build brands that are exceptionally valuable and they're flexible. They can adjust with circumstances like COVID-19, right? And just a world that's constantly throwing changes at us. And yet we can remain consistent even when our products and services change because our brands are built from the bottom up. It's a lot like a foundation of a house, right? If we want to think about a house for a second, think about the last time that you went, maybe you looked for a house for yourself or someone else. Maybe someone was shopping for a house or you were looking for a new house. What's the first thing that you looked at when you were shopping for a house? You looked at the kitchen, you looked at the exterior, you looked at the landscaping, right? You looked at the bathrooms, you looked at everything, probably except for the foundation, right? It's like the last thing anyone looks at when they purchase a house, right? And yet, when we look at a house, and if we were to get, all the way down the road, we love the kitchen and we love the bathrooms and we love the exterior and this is a great neighborhood and man, like this is a great place. Let's do one last check. Let's get somebody in here who knows something and have them check the foundation. They check the foundation. If that foundation is bad, are you going to purchase that home even when all the other boxes are checked? Probably not. At least if you did, you'd probably be kicking yourself later, right? And so I think that's why it's really important we start with the foundation of our brands first. And the foundation of our brands is not the product, right? I think a lot of times we get this confused. We think that the product is our brand, and that's not really true. The brand is something deeper than just our products and services. Our products and services are a really big part of it, but they're not the end of it, right? So again, think about the house, right? All that stuff on the outside, even the kitchen on the inside, those are really important things, but they're a lot like your products in your business. They're important, right? But the brand is foundational, right? And it's something deeper than what you get to see, touch, and feel every single day. It's easy to interpret a product or a service, but it's a lot harder. It's not as easy to interpret the foundation of your brand. And that's why it takes more work. That's why I think a lot of people want to kind of shortcut it a little bit. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think it really, really matters to work on the foundation of your brand first, right? Or at least as soon as you can, right? Even if you got product and service out there in the world, work on your brand. Work on the foundation of your brand. Here's the first example, all right? We've got 2 minivans up, and I want you to think about purchasing a minivan. In this scenario, you are purchasing a minivan. You're not purchasing another car, right? And you've narrowed it down. You've got Chrysler on the left. You've got Volkswagen on the right. Which one do you choose? All right, ready, set, go. All right, what was your kind of initial leaning, right? When I do this workshop and I do this presentation, I've done it with hundreds and hundreds of people. The overwhelming majority of people pick the Volkswagen, the one on the right, right? And then my question always is, why? And I get answers like German engineering or, safety, because, it's a brand that's known for safety. And then my question to you is, if you were leaning towards Volkswagen, or even if you were leaning towards Chrysler, what's the fundamental difference between these 2 vans, right? And you're a little bit dated here, but this is an important part of this, right? This is an important part of this scenario. There's actually fundamentally no difference between these 2 vans. You get past the exterior, the styling, and the logo, and maybe some of the interior styling. There's really no difference between these 2 vans. They are literally the exact same drivetrain, right? Volkswagen licensed this van from Chrysler. This is Chrysler's van. So whether you're buying the Volkswagen on the right or the Chrysler on the left, you're literally getting a Chrysler. And yet, which one sells for more money? The Volkswagen does by an average of $10,000, right? And that tells us that brand provides perceived value, right? They have established themselves as the brand of engineering and safety, which allows them to take the exact same product that Chrysler has and sell it for more, right? That's perceived value. That's actual value that they're putting out into the market because of their brand alone, right? Brand does matter. And there's actual data to prove this. You can grab these slides at the end. I'll have a link for you if you want to go and dig into the source of this data. It's down at the bottom. But basically what this study looked at was brands, and it ranked them by low, medium, and high strength, right? They had an algorithm for understanding how strong their brand was. And then they looked at product pricing. And what they found was that high strength brands outpriced their competition dramatically. 13% higher prices than low strength brands and 6% higher than medium strength brands, right? So for the same products, you can charge more, right? There's a price premium to be had because the consumer sees you as more valuable, right? Because you have a stronger brand. Here's another example for you. This is a pretty simple example. We've got 2 logos in the window of this car, right? What are they? All right, you know, one's Uber and one's Lyft, right? How did you know, right? Well, their logos are there, and are their logos different? Yes, they are, right? Not only in terms of form, right, the shape, but also in terms of color, right? And as you think about your experience, if you've ever used Uber or Lyft, hopefully you've used both in this scenario. That kind of helps give you a little bit of time. But even if you haven't, if you've only used one, think about your experience with them, right? Are their apps basically the same? Yep. Is the pricing pretty similar? Yep. In fact, are you even going to get a different driver? Probably not. I mean, look at this guy or this gal, whoever's driving this car, right? This driver actually is working for both Uber and Lyft. And so if you were to use either one, you'd probably get the same person. And so there's really not a big fundamental difference between these 2 brands from a product standpoint. And yet people choose one over the other, right? And that's what the power of brand does, is it differentiates you. So even when all things are pretty well equal, right? You get to differentiate through your brand. You say, we are us and not them, and they're them and not us. And so you can pick as a consumer, come pick one, right? Hopefully you've got a little bit more. Maybe you got some perceived value in there too, that helps them choose you. But, for better or for worse, you're different. So be different. All right, last example here. Going back to Nike, because we love Nike, apparently. This is an easy, really great example, right? So here we've got a whole bunch of products from Nike. And I want you to think about, what is Nike actually known for? What is like their single most well-known product on the planet? Or at least product category, right? Shoes, of course, right? And you could say basketball shoes, they're very well known for that, but any kind of athletic shoe, right? And yet, what do we see here? What is their logo on? How many different kinds of products is their logo on? And not even pictured here is their app, right? One of the most used running apps in the entire world. Are they a software company? I thought they were a shoe company, right? Or are they a apparel company? Or I don't know, backpacks seem a little different than even apparel. And they've got all sorts of other stuff. They got basketball, so maybe they're a sports equipment company, right? No, I mean, that's the power of their brand, right? Is that they're not siloed into a specific product. They have super loyal customers who want the swoosh on their products. It doesn't really matter what kind of product they produce, as long as it's generally about athleticism, about accomplishing something. Remember, go back to that tagline, just do it. Does it resonate with just do it? Then we're going to make a product and we're going to put our swoosh on it and people will want it, right? Because brands build loyalty. Some of this is pretty functional, right? The fact that you have a customer already makes it easier for that customer to decide to purchase from you again, not only the same product, but into a different product, right? A different kind of product, different category. Why is that? Because our brains are wired to not work too hard, right? And making a decision requires our brains to work. It actually expends calories, and we're biologically wired to reduce our caloric spend, right? We want to conserve calories. So our brains, when we're faced with a choice, we have to make a decision about I need a new pair of socks, right? We're going back to the product display here. I need a new pair of socks. Well, I really like Nike, and well, the swoosh will match my shoes, and maybe I've already got a Nike shirt, and man, like it all makes sense to me, right? It's just easier to buy from a brand that I already know and trust than it is to go build a new relationship with a new brand that I've never purchased from before, right? And so now as a brand, you can start to expand your products and services in ways that make sense to your customers, and they will want to buy because they already have a relationship with you and your brand. There's data to back this up, right? So again, we have another study here. This one actually looked at stock value of strong brands versus the overall market. And so over a 10-year period from April 2006 to April 2017, and included in that is the Great Recession, right? This portfolio that they built of strong brands that they recognized as stronger than most others outperformed the S&P by it outperformed the S&P by 125%, 124.9, and it outgrew the MSCI World Index by 52% over that 10-year period, right? Strong brands. And we're seeing that right now, right? 4 to 5 of the strongest brands in the world, Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, I think is in there, and Amazon, right? Are the primary movers in our stock values, in our stock market today, right? Strong brands carry, right? They produce much higher value and they produce loyalty. And I would argue in a crowded marketplace, and every marketplace is crowded, not just because of your competitors, because there's tons of communication out there that is in front of your customers, right? In front of your potential customers. Brand wins. In a crowded marketplace, brand wins every single time. So we want to talk about, okay, what's going to give you the best chance to build a brand that really cuts through all that noise? And I would argue it is the truth, right? What's the alternative? A fake, false, or forced brand. And we live in a world, in a digital world, where communication is so easy that anytime you build a fake, false, or forced brand, it will come to light very quickly, right? Customers can see it, they can smell it, and they will call you out on it very quickly. We don't live in a world of the 1960s where if you just pumped enough ads out into the world, you could create a brand that was totally fake. You can for a short amount of time now, but man, you're going to be uncovered very quickly. So how do we find the truth of our brands, right? Well, I think you have to ask yourself 4 fundamental questions. Where do we want to go? What do we really value? How does it all feel? And what story do we tell? What story are we putting out into the market? And that's the one we're going to focus on today with your brand pitch. Okay. So the others are maybe the deliverables are vision, core values, personality, but today we're going to focus on brand pitch. So what is a brand pitch? Well, at its most fundamental level, it's a story. It really is just a story. And that may seem simplistic. You might be like, oh, Mike, come on. Like, it's just a story. Yes, but it's a very particular kind of story with very particular elements that allow you to build a brand pitch that cuts through, that makes sense to people, provides clarity as they're evaluating if they want to buy from you, okay? It's going to be short. This is a tool that you're going to use in a lot of communication, and the core of it is about 2 to 3 sentences, maybe a little bit more, but we want to keep it pretty short so that it's concise, right? We live in a hyper-fast digital world. People don't have time to read a brand pitch or engage with a brand pitch that's paragraphs and paragraphs long. You got to keep it short. That's also going to help to focus it. It's going to help to say, this is what we are, and we're not anything else, and that helps to provide clarity for people. It definitely has characters because it's a story. You got to have characters. It's going to have a beginning, middle, and end, just like any great story. And it's going to answer the questions of why, how, and what of your brand. And we'll get into that in a minute. And what do you do with it? Well, it's going to inform all of your content, right? And this is from both a marketing, sales, customer service, even in terms of your internal communication with staff. This tool should be in the front of your mind or in front of you, literally, physically, every time you say something that represents the brand, right? This should be the core pitch that goes into every communication. All right, so let's jump into the characters real quick. I'll start to break this down so we can understand. And we're going to use the example from Star Wars because that's such a great formulaic story that's going to help us identify the key pieces of a pitch. And we'll pull it all together here. It'll make sense, but bear with me for a minute. So the characters, there are 2 primary characters in your brand pitch. There is a hero who has a problem. And then secondly, there's a guide who has a solution. Okay. So there's your 2 characters, your hero and your guide. And each of them come to the story or come to the pitch with a very particular thing they have. The hero has a problem they come to the pitch with, and the guide in your pitch has the solution. And I think that's going to lead us to understand, well, who is the hero in your brand pitch, right? I think you want to think about this carefully. There is a right and wrong answer. If you answer, well, the brand is the hero of the brand pitch, that answer is wrong, right? It's not, the hero of your brand pitch is never you. It's not the brand. It has to be your customer. And why is that? Well, because your customer is the one with the problem. If your brand pitch is about the brand and it's the hero, right? The brand pitch, the hero of your brand pitch is you, the brand, then you're going to have a problem to solve, right? This is how great stories are crafted. This is not new. This is not a new formula, right? Joseph Campbell, great philosopher and studier of literature and storytelling, developed this framework for storytelling. And in it, he said every single great story in the history of the world has a hero and a guide. And the hero is always the one with the problem, and the guide is always the one with the solution. So as you're building your brand pitch, you have to identify the hero as your customer, right? That has to be foremost. It cannot be your brand, because then your brand can't be the guide with the solution. Also, your brand pitch is not for you. It is for your heroes, right? For the customers that you're pitching to, right? And that's what's going to make it a really effective pitch, is because you're going to be using your customer as the hero and talking to your customer with your pitch, and it's going to resonate with them. So who is it? And this is where you got to do some work. You really got to understand your customers, right? You got to understand these heroes in your story. And in particular, you have to identify their problem or their pain point, right? What is it that's really challenging them that you're going to be able to help them solve, right? What are these particular pains that they're having that your products and services are going to make a difference in? And the more specific you can get, the better your pitch is going to be. And we'll get to some examples to help flesh that out. All right, so then we got our second character, the guide, right? We already know the guide is the brand, right? You are Yoda. So if we think about the story of Luke, Luke comes on the scene in the first Star Wars movie, and who is Luke, right? He's kind of this helpless teenager kid who wants to get off this planet. He's kind of a punk. He's kind of annoying, discovers that he has the Force, and he doesn't know how to use it. And so who comes along to help him really understand who he is and how to fully maximize this new power that he's discovered? And that's Yoda, right? Yoda comes on the scene, and we find that Yoda is a super wise, super experienced, super smart character, right? He's this guide for Luke, and he provides a stability and wisdom, and he says, look, there's a path that you need to go down in order to understand how to use this power, and I have already been there, right? And that's established through things like Yoda is 800 years old. He has proven success that we won't even totally know about in that movie. We find out more about that later. But clearly he demonstrates it when he uses the Force. He uses the same power that Luke has in ways that Luke never thought he could, right? And so now we're starting to see that this character is incredibly important in the story. And in your pitch, you are the guide. You are the one who comes with a solution to help solve your hero's problem, to solve your customer's problem, to alleviate those pain points that you've already developed, right? You are Yoda, right? Now, your solution might not be kind of this training or service like Yoda. It might be a product, right? It's the same thing though. Your product is going to solve a problem for your hero. All right, so now we're going to start to piece it together. And there, I have a worksheet. If you'd like to download that, you can go to the URL below. I'll have it on a bunch of slides here. I'll have it at the end too. So you'll be able to get a chance to go grab it. It's going to help you work through this process on your own. But your brand pitch has to have a beginning, middle, and end. And we're going to create a fictitious company. It's a very simplistic company called SmileCo. And I'm going to walk you through how we kind of put together this Mad Libs style version of your brand pitch. All right, so the beginning is the State of the Union before the State of the Union for your hero, before you as the guide show up, right? So we could do that by answering the question, before we were here, before the brand was here, what did the world look like for our hero? For your customer, what did it look like? And if in the case of SmileCo, we're going to say, before we were here, preschoolers were sad, right? And right in this first line, we've established who the hero is. In this case, for SmileCo, the brand, it's preschoolers. That's their customer. And what is their problem? They were sad, right? Again, this is super simplistic, the example here. Yours is probably going to be a little bit more complex. It's going to have some layers to it, all right? So if you're working through the worksheet, you would actually start writing that out. Before we were here. Sometimes it's helpful to do that a few times, and you'll get a few different answers, or even pull a team together and have them all answer this question individually, and then come and kind of compare notes and see where you end up. All right. So then the middle of the story is, how does your arrival as the guide, right? You are the guide. You show up like Yoda. And how do you help the customer, the hero, realize the need they have for what you have to help them, right? And this is where you get to establish what your product or service is, or what your service offering or product offerings are, and how that fundamentally helps your hero overcome their problem. All right, so you would answer that by saying, then we showed up, and fill in the blank, right? For our example company, it's, then we showed up with our SmileCo Smile Paint vending machines, and preschoolers realized that they didn't have to be sad. All right, so we've established the product, SmileCo Smile Paint vending machines. Probably want to develop that out a little bit more, what makes them interesting and compelling. But in this case, this example, we're going to keep it really simple. We just established that here's our solution to them being sad, and they get to realize that they don't have to be sad anymore. All right, so then you could write it for you. Then we showed up, and fill in the blank. All right, so finally the ending. Again, this is super simplistic. This is just to kind of get you to where you can kind of fill in the blanks, and then we'll put it all together in a few minutes here. But what at the end, what are you doing for the customer? Or what new state of mind do they have, right? They overcome their problem with your guidance, with your product, or with your service. And you can answer that by saying the difference we made, and then fill in the blank. The difference we made, so here's the example for SmileCo. The difference we made is that preschoolers painted smiles on their faces and made each day of school a little happier, right? Okay, so they got to use the product, and it actually allowed them to kind of do or experience school in a little bit more fun way, right? You fill in the blank for your brand. The difference we made is, and then fill in the blank. And then there's a what if statement that you can use. This helps to kind of frame that ending. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of, what's the alternate ending to the movie? What happens if the hero doesn't use you, right? What happens if your customer doesn't go with your brand? And for SmileCo, we could say when we weren't there, preschoolers didn't have a way to express happiness and their school experience was less joyful. This gives an antithesis or an opposite to our positive ending, right? And I think that's a really unique and helpful way to kind of in your head frame, like, what is the real difference we're making for people? All right. So for you, you could write when we weren't there and fill in the blank. So now we get to put it all together and start to get a little creative. So we're going to give you the example for SmileCo. And you can see how we've kind of crafted it a little bit more, right? The world felt like a sad place because preschoolers didn't have an alternative to sadness and frowns. SmileCo, like a ray of light bursting through burdensome clouds, brought a new and refreshing alternative to sadness with our face paint vending machines. Preschoolers everywhere took notice, choosing to abandon continued sadness and painting their faces with SmileCo's amazing brand of smiles. All right, this is super simplistic. It's a little over the top in terms of some of the language we're using, but you kind of get the point where we took that very formulaic Mad Libs version and we just rewrote it one more time and just kind of said, all right, let's put it together and kind of make it a little bit more interesting. And here we already get something that's somewhat compelling, right? We're starting to get there. It's not fully, it's not all the way there. It's not the most creative thing in the world. And yours won't be too until you really work through the full process. So that's your baseline brand pitch, kind of baseline, a little basic, right? So let's make it resounding, right? How do we make it really resound for people? And I'm going to give you 4 different ways that you can do that, right? So a resounding brand pitch is going to weave the pieces together covertly. I gave you a very formulaic way in which to write it. Beginning, middle, end. Here's the hero. Here's the guide. Here's the problem. Here's the solution, right? We kind of work through that process because you have to understand all the parts in order to put it together. But if you really want to do it in a compelling way, you have to do it in a way that kind of weaves those pieces together a little bit more covertly. So I'm going to give you an example from Virgin America. They do a pretty good job kind of weaving these pieces together. So you'll see here, they actually start at the beginning with the problem. And in this case, they allude to the problem that they're on a mission to make flying good again, which alludes to the fact that it's not good, right? But they're going to make flying good again. And that's also the ending too, but we'll get into that. And then they talk about the happy ending, right? So what is it that you as a customer of Virgin America Airline, what are you going to get out of your experience? Well, brand new planes, attractive fares, top-notch service, and a host of fun, innovative amenities, right? So now we have the ending, but it's actually in the middle of their pitch. And then finally they get to the middle, right? Which is that kind of like you come on the scene and what do you deliver for people? How do you solve their problem? In this case, it's all the features, right? So we've got, mood-lit cabins with Wi-Fi, custom designed leather seats, power outlets, and a video touchscreen at every seat back, right? Here's all the amenities. So they've kind of inverted some of the order here and given us a little bit more kind of woven together brand pitch that's a little bit more interesting because of that. Another way that you can make your brand pitch resounding is to infer the hero's problem from the solution. And what I mean by that is you don't explicitly state the problem, but you infer it from the solution you're going to provide for them. In this case, we have Beats Audio, and they say here near the end, they help bring the energy, emotion, and excitement of playback into the recordings or playback in the recording studio back to the listening experience. And what they're alluding to is that the current experience that you have with your headphones or with whatever you're listening to music through in your ears is not the full experience that the original producers of the music wanted you to have. You're not hearing everything, right? But they don't state it that way. They state it as the positive. We're going to bring the energy, emotion, and excitement of playback in the recording studio back to the listening experience. So you can infer the problem through your solution. And then another way that you can make your brand pitch more resounding is to imply the audience, right? Kind of the same thing. You can infer the problem. You can also imply the audience rather than explicitly stating it. So if we think back to our Smile Co brand example, we literally said preschoolers are the hero, right? We actually state the word preschoolers to identify that they're the customer. You don't have to do that. You can imply your audience. And this often is helpful with brands that are actually selling to a wide diversity of people, right? You don't want to explicitly have to sit there and state every single demographic kind of person that you want to sell to, right? So here we have GoPro, and in the middle it says, like how a day on the mountain with friends is more meaningful than one spent alone, the sharing of our collective experiences makes our lives more fun. And in the middle of that it says, a day on the mountain with friends. That is the only thing in their brand pitch here that helps you to understand who they're trying to sell to. So instead of stating, oh, we sell to adventure-seeking sports enthusiasts who like to snowboard, right? They instead say, like how a day on the mountain with friends, and you have a mental picture of that, some maybe activity that goes with that, and you can imply, oh, there's a certain kind of person that would really find value in GoPro. Excuse me. All right. And then lastly, the fourth way that you can make your brand pitch resounding is to leverage your founder's story. This adds some personalization to your story. Warby Parker does a great job with this. They actually use their own founder's experience when he lost his own glasses and the process of going and buying new glasses and saying, this was a terrible experience. I want to create something that's better, right? I think there's a better way to do this. And then boom, birth of Warby Parker, right? And in this case, they're leveraging their founder story not only to connect with the audience and say, look, you're having this problem. We've already had this problem and we've solved it, which validates that they're a great guide in the story here in their pitch. But it also provides a sense of personalization, right? This is real. This is personal for the founders of Warby Parker. This isn't just like, oh, we had an idea and we thought we could make a lot of money. It was like, no, we think we can do that. But also we had this problem. We've already had the same problem that you're having and we've solved it for you. Here's some examples for you. Infuego is a startup that we've worked with to put together their brand pitch. So looking for a job shouldn't be frustrating. You shouldn't have to chase dead-end opportunities with zero feedback and then wonder if you'll ever be the right fit. It shouldn't take so long that you feel invisible and invalidated as a human being. We see the job hunt as it should be, decoding talent acquisition technology and helping you find the right fit faster. We make the job search suck less, right? So this pitch in here, it's alluded to, but you know, who are they who are they helping? Who is the hero of their story who has this problem? Well, it's somebody looking for a job, right? It's a job searcher, someone who's really just not having success in looking for a job. And they're frustrated because they can't find that right fit, right? And they're having this kind of gatekeeping, non-human experience with all these big companies who have those big search filters and, you know, they sift through all the resumes. That's their experience. And so Infuego comes on the scene and says, we make the job search suck less, right? So what are we looking at here? 4 sentences, we've been able to pitch, they're able to pitch their entire brand in 4 sentences. That's the power of a brand pitch. Another example for you is Field Verified. This is a B2B service-based company. You can read through this whole thing. It's a little bit longer. They're a little bit more complex as an organization. They provide a lot of different services, but they're all under this value of covered with verified integrity. And so that's kind of their overarching theme of what they're providing for the heroes in their story who are having problems with the integrity, not only of the product that Field Verified tests, but also verified integrity in the companies and partners that they choose to work with, like Field Verified. So our own brand story, I said it at the beginning, I'm not going to say it again, but we've done the same process for ourselves, our brand pitch. And we've had a lot of success actually using this. Gets our point across really quickly. That's one of the things I love so much about brand pitches is like you immediately have something to say that's going to resonate with someone. It tells them, you know, what do you do and why do you do it and how does it work, right? In a really short, concise, and compelling way. So how can you use your brand pitch? Well, you can use it to pitch. It's literally what it's for. So you could use it to pitch, kind of like an elevator pitch, right? Like, so if you're meeting someone for the first time in a networking environment, if you're in sales, or maybe you're pitching to investors or a particular partner that you're wanting to bring on, or even with your customers, maybe you're having a sales call or you're putting together some kind of communication and you want to talk about your brand in a quick, concise, and compelling way. Your brand pitch is a perfectly packaged story to put out there, right? Even with your employees, right? Imagine if you had something this concise that you could put in front of every single employee that you onboard and say, this is what we do, right? There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more detail, but this in a nutshell is what we do. All right. You can also, I would recommend creating different versions based on who you're talking to in the context of your audience. So you can take that same formula of the hero and the guide and run different audience segments through it. Maybe you have different types of customers that you want to talk to. Maybe you have, you want to put a little different take on it for an investor or a potential partner or a potential employee or a current employee. It's fine. It's okay to take that brand pitch and run it through a filter that says, who am I going to be talking to? Can I tweak this a little bit, right? Can I make it really resonate with the audience that I'm going to be talking to today or talking to in a particular communication that I'm putting out into the world? All right. You can also use that headline and intro on your website. In fact, some of our clients we've actually been able to develop whole taglines right from their brand pitch. You saw that with Field Verified. Covered with verified integrity is their tagline. And so you can actually take your brand pitch and actually start piecing parts of it out and using those in different places, whether that's on your website, whether that's just within your general communication. Becomes an automatic boilerplate for all of your brochures, sales sheets, press releases, anything you're putting out into the world where you need to talk about your brand in a really quick and concise way. You can just grab your brand pitch and drop it right in there. And then each part of your brand pitch, so as you talk about the hero, you talk about their problem, you could talk about you as the guide, maybe a particular solution, or the happy ending, right, that comes out at the end for your hero. Each one of those pieces of your brand pitch can become inspiration for all sorts of kinds of content that you want to put out in the world, whether that's blog posts, newsletters, ebooks, articles for publications, even advertisements, commercials, anything that you're going to put out to communicate about your brand. You could take a part of your brand pitch and develop that out. Really, think through all the detail of it that you're not able to unpack right in that, 2 to 4 sentences. Excuse me. Could even be inspiration to write a book. In fact, our brand pitch is the inspiration for a book that we're writing right now, my partners and I, and should be out this fall. That talks all about kind of what does it mean to create a remarkable brand? What does that look like? How do you do that? Getting into all these tactics in a lot more detail. All right. So I've got some homework for you. I want to finish up here quick because I know people need to go. So what I want you to do is go through that, that process that I've already outlined. Go grab the worksheet if that's helpful. And I want you to write your brand pitch. And then what I want you to do is be able to tell your mom your brand pitch and have her go, oh, yeah, I get it. I might not understand everything you do, but I get your brand pitch, okay? But there's a process because you shouldn't just call your mom after this presentation here. It won't go well, I promise you. She'll be like, no, I'm still confused, right? So what you need to do is review what you have. So go through the process, review what you have. You're gonna need to write it and rewrite it. In fact, you're going to have to probably rewrite it many times, right? Get it as fleshed out as you possibly can. Try different versions of it. And then actually put it together with those different tactics I gave you to make it more resounding, right? Weave the pieces together covertly, infer the hero's problem from the solution, imply the audience, leverage your founder story, and then try it out, right? Talk to different people on your team, talk to family and friends, even customers. In fact, customers are a great place. If you've got really trusted customers, talk to them about your brand pitch and say, hey, does this resonate with you? Does this seem right? Does it match what you know about us? And then what I want you to do is take every day for 5 days, talk to a different stranger, right? And tell them your brand pitch and say, does this make sense? And if they say, not really, and here's some feedback for you, listen to it and really try to incorporate that feedback. And ultimately, you just have to do it. So when you get to the end and you feel like, man, I've done the process, then call up your mom, tell her your brand pitch. And I'll guarantee you, if you go through the process and you really do the work, she'll turn around and go, yeah, I actually maybe for the first time ever understand what you do, right? Will you resound your brand pitch? That's my call to action for you today. I've got some more resources for you if this has been inspiring and helpful for you. Obviously, the pitch worksheet that I already mentioned before, it's up here now. Also, if you want to grab this deck, you can get it at rsnd.co/ACA bootcamp. Just go and grab that. There's other tools that you might want to be working on beyond your brand pitch. We have a free audit. It's an online tool. It's totally free, hands off. You don't have to talk to me or anything like that. But if you want a tool that's going to kind of help you identify where your brand needs help, or maybe where you've already got a lot of things working for you, but you've got some other areas to work on, I recommend checking that out and trying it out. It might help you to kind of focus your activity. So there's my contact info. If there's anything, you got more questions. I know we've got a couple questions that were posted in the Q&A. Robert, I know we're running out of time here, so I don't want to, but if you want, I can run through those real quick. And then if there's any other questions, we can get
Yeah, if you just want to take a minute, Mike, real quick and answer those, if you can read through those. We're running a little bit over, but we'll take questions and then we'll wrap up.
All right, we've got David here who said, he asked, what driving factor would contribute to the brand equity of a company? How did Facebook or Amazon or Google build famous brands way before they were even cash flow positive? Brand loyalty and brand recognition are important for established companies. How does a new and untested business immediately acquire strong brand equity? Well, I think the first place you have to start is thinking about your audience, right? So Google, Facebook, even Amazon was hyper niched and hyper focused with their audiences early on. And so they built brand equity within a smaller segment of the market before they dominated, at this massive level that they're doing right now. Think about Amazon real quick. How did they start? They really went after book lovers, right? And they said, we're going to be all about books. And now we know that their brand is so much more than that, right? And Bezos always had that vision long-term for the brand, but he started niche. He started small and he said, look, we're going to provide a very specific solution for a very specific audience. And we're going to deliver on that really, really well. He also, you think about any of those brands, they sacrificed profit for a long time, right? Amazon wasn't profitable for 15 years. That's probably an extreme example. I don't think most businesses can even afford to do that, but that is something. They put everything into building their product and building their brand first before they went and chased profitability. And so I think that's an important kind of thing to have in the back of your head is like, how are you investing in your brand? Because it's an investment. The other question here, from the etymology of branding to storytelling techniques and tactics. Oh, there's not even a question. This was just, someone was very excited about the presentation. So thank you, Rosemary. I appreciate that. I thought there was a question there. That's great. Yeah, if there's any other questions, feel free to post them or reach out to me directly. I'm very willing to, oh, we want somebody to go back to the second to last slide.
You're gonna throw up your tools. These tools will be available on our website. The presentation with those links will also be available. They'll be posted shortly, so you can access them there. We are running over in time and we will need to wrap up. But Mike, awesome presentation. I got a great deal out of this. I was taking a lot of notes for a little side project that I've got, so thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we appreciate your time. Again, thank you all for the attendees for being on the boot camp today.
Thank you, Mike.
And this information will be available on our website. So we look forward to having you join us tomorrow for Wednesday's session. But again, one last thank you, Mike, for sharing this information on branding and how to tell your brand story. Great session. So thank you all and have a great day.